my laptop. and then Skype. So it's one, it is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. But straight into it, like I say, you're extremely. I didn't realize quite how busy you were until I did a little bit of research, and you've got so much on your plate at the moment.
Yeah.
Obviously, the big thing is the solo album, Sleeping Giants. I heard a little bit of it earlier. It sounds really, really good.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, it's kind of a nice, it's a combination of some new tracks. In particular, Vultures is a brand new track. Hammer Comes Down and Sleeping Giants it was music I had, but then my partner Tom finished lyrics, did a collaboration with DMC on Sleeping Giants, collaboration with Eric A.K. from Flotsam and Jetsam on Hammer, as well as bringing in our friends Mark Tremonti and Chris Poland to play some guitar on it with us. Dave McLean from former Machine Head, I guess now Sacred Reich. Yeah. So he put drums down. So yeah, it was fun. It was fun to just kind of get the whole crew together, the whole neighborhood together, and work on those songs. And then I put some of the the F5 demos, which would be from the 2000s. And then some tracks that I had written back in 1993 when we had a break on the Countdown to Extinction album. My friend Pat Shunk, who I was introduced to from Nick Menza, by the way, we had a really fun collaborative season there, kind of in early 1993 when we were on a tour break, and wrote a bunch of tunes and had John Bush sing on If You Were God, had David Glenn Isley sing on some a handful of tracks, and so yeah, it was these are songs that were just kind of sitting literally in a box behind me. That's the vault. There's a box on the shelf back there, CDs, and I was like ruffling through it, and I was talking to Tom Hazer, and as we were conceptualizing this whole thing, we just started putting it together and thought, now, if not now, when? This is probably the best opportunity to pull a bunch of stuff out of the vault, especially to collaborate with the new book, More Life with Deth. It kind of brings the whole story together. So the way that the book and the CD can be, very much a companion to each other.
I think that's quite rare. I know Mark Tremonti did that with his latest album. That was a companion piece to his first book.
Yeah.
But to go along with an autobiography and have new music to go with that is very interesting. You'd expect, if anything, a compilation album to go with an autobiography.
Yeah, it's kind of my life is always about these kind of unusual ideas and unusual things, which is cool. I like it. Obviously Megadeth, we make records, we tour, we do, we've been doing that for many years. So it's kind of nice at this point in my life to have these other opportunities to do different things and approach, maybe the same thing from a different way, again, book, solo album, rather than just, okay, David Ellefson's putting out a solo album. It's like, all right, that, because again, I'm not going solo, I'm still in Megadeth, and, doing that. It just sort of, it was a nice way to kind of put it all together, like I say, music, I write all the time. I'm constantly composing a bunch of guitars and stuff sitting around here that I'm always writing and working on things, but I also like to collaborate, to me, I'm always a guy that wanted to be in bands and in collaborative things. To me, it just is more fun. I think, my idea against your idea, we create something bigger, I've always been a fan of bands, a fan of records that involve, cool, even like as a kid, I was growing up like Rainbow, there'd be like Don Airey, Bob Daisley, Richie Blackmore, Ronnie Dio, like, wow, supergroup, you know what I mean? And I always liked that. I loved when, Michael Schenker would grab different people and, to add to his collection, of musicians and stuff. So I'm a fan of that myself, so to now be able to do that in my own career path is just, it's a lot of fun for me. I really dig it.
Cool. It makes for a lot of fun to listen to as well, to hear, again, like I say, how you bounce off of other people, and that, because that's kind of always been like a conversation topic amongst music fans in general, is, can you imagine someone collaborating with this person? And
right.
So to hear that in Sleeping Giants is a really cool
It is, you know, and I guess funny, I guess now that we're talking about it, you know, I guess, you know, again, my generation, you know, we kind of are the Blackmore, Dio, Bob Daisley, Cozy Powell. We are that era, you know what I mean? Like we've kind of grown up to, you know, as a lot of our heroes now have passed on and are retired, you know, now my generation, we're kind of their next of kin, you know, we're the next, you know, generation coming up behind them. And, you know, like Metal Allegiance, we do the same thing. You know, we bring in the whole gang, you know, and we do these big shows and make records. And, you know, so it's something that I've gotten used to, and I'm certainly very comfortable in working in that kind of an environment.
Sweet. If we can talk a little bit about the book, I know obviously this is the sequel, if you like, to My Life With Deth, which was quite comprehensive. That went all the way up to you rejoining the band, and I think did that include, was it 13 or Super Collider was the latest album at that point?
I think 13 probably just started to touch a little bit on 13, right. And then of course the you know, the big four was just starting to happen right as I was writing that book. Yeah, you know, it's funny. A book is a lot like an album. It's a snapshot of a moment of your life, you know, and like you say, in that case, that was sort of birth until 2010, 11, 12, whenever I had to kind of like stop writing it to get it out. Yeah. And it's funny how More Life With Deth is kind of, again, we, you know, Tom and I always say it's like when Marvel puts out a new, you know, new Spider-Man or a new movie, you know, you kind of always retell the origin story a little bit, you know. So again, this one dipped back to, oh yeah, I grew up on a farm, and so we kind of go back and tell the origin story, and but then you kind of, you know, every book, you find it's narrative, you know, you find your sweet spot, and in this case, you know, man, a lot has happened since My Life With Deth came out. You know, I between the record label, the coffee company, the big four shows, Megadeth winning a Grammy, you know, and a lot of transitions even inside of Megadeth. You know, a lot happens, and you know, I always say life is a verb, not a noun. You know, it's an action, it's a continuum. So you know, a book is just sort of a snapshot of that continuum. You know, even since I've written this book, more stuff has happened, you know, so there's already another book. Really, as long as you're alive, you're always kind of writing the next book, because you're living a story, and at some point to go back and sort of capture that story and put it into words and put it out in print method, you know, I like it. I like the process of it. I think there's things you can talk about in a book that is a little more difficult to capture in a song. You know, songs, because you're a little bit limited by rhythm, melody, cadence, maybe 3.5 minutes, you know, to kind of get it all in. I find sometimes the message of a song can be a little bit cryptic, and that's part of the fun of it. Something that I write may mean something different to you than it meant to me, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Whereas a book is very literal. This is what happened. This is who was there. This is what was said. You know, it's very defined. But I enjoy both processes, and they both kind of, I think, scratch the same itch in a different way.
It's a little bit silly, but I find it quite funny you use the word cryptic to describe songwriting process as opposed to the book having released cryptic writings.
Well, there. Look, we said it on that album. These are cryptic writings. They mean something to us. They mean something different to you. You know, whether it's a song like "Trust," which is, you know, almost a personal testimony. It's like, who can't relate to that on some level? You know, that's a human story that goes back to biblical times. You know what I mean? You know, because I think it's a human story. Yet, you know. Use the Man, for instance, which is where that lyric actually shows up. Cryptic writings on the wall, you know, is actually a line in that song. That song was written about a specific situation, an incident. But you know, even as I hear it, I think about that particular situation. But you weren't there for that situation, so. To you, you may go, oh man, this totally triggers a memory or a thought about something in my life, and I think that's the beauty of music. Is it inspires your imagination as a listener. In the same way, I read a lot of documentary books. I love the rock and roll books myself. I read all my heroes books, you know, Ace Frehley, Sammy Hagar, etc. You know, but at the same time, you know, when I read fiction, you know, you kind of get lost in the story. You know, when they're painting a picture of, you know, the guy was standing in Times Square, New York City, da da da. You know, all of a sudden, I kind of, you know, it engages your imagination as well, and I think that's the beauty of a song. Is a song can be, you know, as fictional or non-fictional as you, the listener, may want it to be. So it's, you know, it's all communication to me. Just like you and me talking right now. You ask a question, I answer. It's very literal. Writing a book, again, you know, when I say, oh, then me and Tom were in Mankato, Minnesota at this music store, you know, now it sort of engages the creative. Like, I wonder what that music store looks like. Does it look like the one I go to down the street? Or is it, you know, so I love that it's, I think it's what we like about music and all that we do as musicians and artists is you're constantly engaged in this creative narrative. You know, and again, like I say, to me, a book, an album, it's just a different approach to the same sort of philosophy, I think.
Fantastic. That's a really interesting way of thinking about it. And where you were talking about the imagery and that kind of thing, like I say, it's almost like a little movie going off in your head, which leads very nicely into the next question, because I know you now have your own company, Ellefson Films. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. We have our first film, Dwellers. We're actually going to be premiering the trailer of it at a horror con up in up in Niagara Falls on the Canada side, just over the border from Niagara Falls in America, where I performed with Megadeth, actually with Bass Story as well. We performed there. I've never seen the falls from the Canadian side, which is really, I think, the picture that when you see the falls. Yeah, of Niagara Falls, it's taken from the Canada side. So I'm looking forward to going to see the falls from a different view, how the Canadians see it. But also, we're going to be premiering the trailer and doing a Q&A with the director and the lead star, Drew Fortier, of the Dwellers film. And I call it the Blair Witch genre. You know, the Blair Witch film it's created this whole new genre of filmmaking, this very kind of independent, sort of self-filmed type, you know,
documentary kind of
thing. Exactly. But yet it's very much a you know, it's a fictional story, so it's a fictional horror story. So it's fun. It's super cool. It's a really fun, you know, kind of another chapter to you know what we do here on Team Ellefson.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the teaser trailer for it earlier, and I don't know if the clip is explicitly from the film or if it's purely for promotional. But it was very well done. It was very creepy, and it was interesting to me because, like you say, it's like a found footage kind of thing.
Yes.
But it didn't look like it's stereotypical found footage film, which is good because they're 10 a penny.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, again, just as an artist myself and having made both indie records with a lot of money, some without a lot of money, major label records, obviously with a lot of money, you know, and having to get the, you know, I think you kind of want a quality about it, even though the whole premise is that this is a DIY kind of thing. But yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that. You know, Drew's sending me little bits and pieces of the trailer that he's putting together, and of course I see it and approve it, and you know we collaborate on it. But I'm kind of letting it be his baby. You know, he's the director. Okay. I'll be the production company on it, but I'm letting him be the director, and he's also a musician, and he wrote a little memoir himself, and so we're kind of brothers in arms on this. And he's got a real great creative tempo and just a kind of I just like he's just a cool dude, and so I'm you know letting him kind of have his space with it, which is a lot of fun for us to collaborate on.
Cool. I was reading the synopsis as well, and I say it's about like homeless people disappearing.
Yeah.
Along that lines, anyway. I don't know if that's the.
Well, yeah, it's like they're out
story.
doing a documentary on homeless people, and then in the making of the film of that, the people in the film start disappearing. Yeah, so
okay, right.
Yeah, it's pretty kind of a cool premise. When he told me about it, I was like, that's freaking clever, man. That's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, because before you said it was those people disappearing, it reminded me of Chud. I don't know if you ever saw that.
I know of.
Yeah,
I know of. Yeah.
And that's a similar kind of thing, but with let's say, a more tasteless approach. But it's cool as well to hear that, like you say, he's a musician as well, and he's experienced with that. The film that you two are first releasing has nothing to do with music, because that's kind of a stereotype, if you like, is, well, write about what you know or something, so it becomes.
Yeah,
you don't want to release a film like Trick or Treat or Black Roses.
People have asked me, said, would you ever like to write a fictional book? And I would, but I don't want to just write it like a Spinal Tap, that's I could write my own life story and just change the names and then become a fiction. It could almost be a horror story at times, the lives we live being in rock bands. But I think it's fun to go way out of genre, and that's what this is with the film. And it's fun for me because I do some appearances at these horror cons and comic cons. The horror cons really connect well, I think, with our heavy metal fan base, especially with the imagery Megadeth has with Big Rattlehead and everything. So I think now to be showing up at a horror con and bringing something to the table with a film, and something that I'm contributing to their genre, not just as me showing up as a the rock star signing autographs, but to bring some creative thrust to the event. I'm proud. I'm happy. So I feel like I'm contributing to the event.
Absolutely. And then not only have you got the book out now, the album out now, the film coming out, you're also heading over to do a solo tour. I say solo tour, obviously it won't just be you and the bass, but and of course the most striking date is the show you're doing in Wolverhampton with KK Downing, Ripper Owens and Les Binks. How did that come about?
Well, KK was kind enough to contribute a story to, and just kind of a testimonial in my book, in More Life With Deth. And we've been friends, and over the years, we always got on well, at Judas Priest, Megadeth tours and shows and stuff. And so he was my go-to guy. I thought, it'd be great to get some words from him. And he did, and he also narrated the audiobook, which will be coming out probably in about a week or so. Right before we hit head over there, we're going to put the audiobook out. And what's cool about the audiobook is it actually features most of the people who are in the book, Mark Slaughter, Dan Donegan from Disturbed, KK, my childhood friends who, contributed to the book. So you actually hear them narrating their portions, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So Ken and I, we connected here recently, and on a cool creative level, and so, and I just finished reading his memoir a few months ago, which I thought was great. And so I hit him up. I said, hey, could at your venue, would you have an availability to stop in and do a book signing? In fact, maybe we could do it together. You can promote your book, and I'll promote my book, and so that was where the whole thing started. Which is where we're offering these VIP tickets, which are currently sold out, and we're going to have his co-author Mark Eglinton moderate a Q&A between me and KK and my partner Tom Hazert, and do that as a VIP thing, and then the doors will open, and then we just basically opened it up into a full-blown rock concert of Blaze Bayley, which KK wanted Blaze on it, which I thought was a great idea. He's a friend certainly to the community, and then I'll do my Sleeping Giant show, and then the KK, Mega Priest portion, as KK calls it. We'll do that show. So this is very much a unique one-off, and but I'm excited. We all are. I think it's super cool. I'm glad KK's excited about it, because he essentially had retired, and now he's I went through a season, when Megadeth had disbanded in 2002, and you kind of stand around and you go, God, now what am I going to do with my life? And of course, KK was a little older, so he was kind of heading into retirement. But at the same time, there's part of us where our life is on the stage. That's what we're on the planet to do. And so I'm glad that KK has sort of, I think, come around to that he's like, let's do it. Let's fire up the amps and plug the guitars in and let's go. So I'm excited, and I mean, no better guy to do it with than him. So I
Absolutely.
think bringing Les Binks in and Tim Rip Rowans and our friend AJ Mills, I think it's going to be a super cool night.
Yeah, I love that it's happening in Wolverhampton as well.
Yeah, right. I mean, of all places, and it's funny because it tells. It kind of harkens back to KK's story in his book. As I read his story, I did not know, obviously, most of his upbringing, and that's what I find fascinating about these books is when you write a book, you certainly obviously talk about some of the big rock stardom stuff, but you have to open yourself up to the personal side of your life, and I thought he did a incredible job with that, especially his childhood back to the area, up around Birmingham and, that whole area there. So to kind of bring this full circle for KK, I don't think he's ever performed at his venue before. So to get his blessing to come out and do this, in full regalia at his own venue in his own backyard, I'm the one who's honored. Believe me, it's.
Well, I was thinking it's funny because you've had this incredible career. You've been part of one of the most successful and, for lack of a better word, powerful heavy metal bands in history. And still you're living every heavy metal fan's dream, not only of having that, but of full intents and purposes being in Judas Priest for a night.
Exactly. And I, like I've said, I am Ian Hill's biggest fan. I mean, I have always admired his bass playing from the minute I heard it. It's clean, it's precise, I've emulated a lot of his style of, during probably the 90s Megadeth, when our songs got a little bit more mainstreamed, to lack of a better degree. I emulated what Judas Priest went through when they had their big 80s MTV years. And Ian's bass playing, at times is very progressive, almost very Jethro Tull, Jack Bruce. And then there's times when he plays real simple to support the song. And I mean, he has been a number one influence of mine. I mean, I have Steve Harris, Geddy Lee, of course, Gene Simmons, but Ian, who is, doesn't get a lot of the big celebrity credit because he's not down front. He's intentionally in the back, and he really holds down the role. If you think about, the most formidable, probably iconic heavy metal bass player, he is it, so now I'm not just listening to these songs in my car as a fan, but to pick up the bass and really study what he's doing has really been an incredible education. And it's funny how, Judas Priest and Megadeth are so similar in so many ways. And obviously a lot of what we learned from Judas Priest. And yet I think, as KK talked about in his book, by the time they did Painkiller, they were very aware of this thrash metal genre, which is, us, coming up behind them. And I think it kicked them in the pants and got them to dig deep and come up with records like Painkiller and even a couple records when Ripper was in the band. There's some pretty deep, pretty intricate stuff in there. Very different Judas Priest in that era. And I can relate to that. Megadeth has done the same thing. We've had to reinvent and dig deep and to reinvent ourselves throughout the 36 years we've been a band. So in a lot of ways, Judas Priest and Megadeth have walked a very similar path, and I think those are things that are probably bond me and KK as kind of brothers in arms as professional musicians. And like you said, I'm also a huge fan. So, to go back and kind of live the teenage dream is I'm all about it. It's again, the honor is mine, man.
It's going to be weird for KK being on stage and seeing a bass player that moves.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. We
I,
did an interview on Eddie Trunk, and Eddie said that. He said, "Man, you're gonna have to be back there giving your best Ian Hill." And KK said, "He goes, no, I want David to be David." So
yeah,
it's yeah. I mean, look, we are who we are, and that's I
yeah. I
think.
mean, that wasn't a dig at Ian or
No,
anything.
no, of course, no, of course.
I've always thought of him as like a Charlie Watts of bass. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
He's
yeah.
just does his job,
He
and he
does
does it
his job,
perfectly.
and he does his job well, man. Yeah,
Yeah,
But yeah, no, exactly. I mean, this is obviously a pretty colorful cast of characters coming from many different genres and even eras of Judas Priest, if you will, between Les Binks, Ripper, Ken, obviously being the consistent. It's cool. So I'm just there to serve the song and play the songs as best as I can, as I know them, and obviously they'll probably have a little David Ellefson spin on them, just because that's how we play. But yeah, it's going to be cool, and
yeah.
we're looking to try to film it and have a version of it that we can at least have up on the web, if maybe not for some other use.
Excellent. Not only that, obviously, only next week now you're off. You're heading out to sea.
Cruise,
The
yeah,
Mega
yeah.
Cruise.
Rush in
I
the
was
high
looking at
seas, yeah,
I was
yeah.
looking at the lineup earlier, and that's a fantastic lineup.
Well, it's good because it's mostly, again, it's, we all grew up together. We've all had our successes, and now we can all get together out on the ocean and thrash away and have fun out there. And we share similar musical paths, journeys, influences, and brotherhood and sisterhood, Doro. And it's just great to bring us all together. I think the lineup is fantastic.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There seems to be like a growing trend in cruises. And I don't want to say the word trend as a bandwagon thing, but obviously there's 70,000 tons of metal. There's Mega Cruise. There's Motorhead had one for a while. There's Chris Jericho's got one now.
Yeah.
When you were launching Mega Cruise, was there any trepidation about it being kind of getting lost in the shuffle or something like that?
No, I think no, not at all. I mean, again, theming it around Megadeth, of course, is, and I think we've got that stature to be able to do that. But also genre similar bands, to make it for pretty much a thrash cruise, not exclusively. I mean, like there's Beasto Blanco, there's Doro's probably not a thrash artist, or Saint, But again, we I think when you sort of bill it, or you kind of think of it as a thrash cruise, there's a certain age group, a certain genre, a certain memory of a point in time. And I think we did really well with collecting those artists from that period and putting us all together, as well as a few new artists as well.
Yeah. Just finally, don't hate me for this, but it's the 20th anniversary of Risk. And I'm that guy. I love Risk.
It's funny. I'll never forget. In fact, I have it clearly in my mind. A moment sitting in the back of the plane with Dave. We were sitting together in a row, me and Dave by the window, me in the middle, and I don't know, maybe Marty or something to my left, or Nick or something. And he had the mixes, I think the mastered mixes from the studio, and probably on a CD player at that time, right, a Discman, and sitting and listening to it on the plane. And this is right before it was coming out. We were flying off to do a show, I think up in Denver or something. And just how much I just got goosebumps. It's like, wow, this is an amazing album. Not thinking about, are the fans going to like it? Is it maybe a little too light for Megadeth? Is it maybe a little too melodic? Because I think probably it is for what, again, a thrash fan of Rust in Peace would expect from Megadeth. But is it part of our legacy? Is it a moment in time of Megadeth? Absolutely, and unapologetically so. I'm a Kiss fan, a Cheap Trick fan, Maiden fan. I mean, I think Judas Priest. I mean, legacy bands. We're faced with not just who we are at that time, and in this case, we had a lineup change. Nick Menza had left, so that was obviously, and Jimmy DeGrasso, fantastic drummer, but not part of a very vibrant, creative part of Megadeth. That kind of started to end on the Risk album. Yeah. Also, the world around us changes, and I think that's one of and the 90s were challenging, man. I mean, look, Seattle changed the whole landscape, not just from a sort of creative thrust, but what radio, MTV, and all the other things that are, you know, important to a career artist. You know, you don't really want to chase those things, and but at the same time, they're part of the equation when you're a career band, you know, and you know, I think we just made a record that, for whatever reason, at that time that was the record we made. For better or for worse, it is what it is. And I also, a fan wrote me a letter one time, or maybe it was in some message on Facebook or something, said, how come you guys, there's a lot of people that talk bad about Risk, but, you know, I was 13 and that was my very first Megadeth album I bought. And I, you know, bought every other Megadeth album after that. And I thought, you know, I got into Kiss during the Destroyer album. And it's an album that they don't even talk about. Gene and Paul are always kind of bagging on it. You know, I think because they're experienced working with Bob Ezra, and it probably wasn't a fun album for it. And I've made albums like that, so I get it when they say that. Yet, you know, that was the album that got me into Kiss. And then I bought everything, you know, through the 70s. I bought all the 70s Kiss. You know, went back and bought everything else, you know. You know, we all come into bands that, you know, I got into Ghost, not on the first album, but on Meliora. And then, you know, so I'm a latecomer to Ghost, you know, but I'm a huge fan. I love them. I bought everything they've ever done, you know. And so, you know, I got into them during kind of maybe their more big mainstream upswing. And, you know, Risk was the same thing, you know. Then the late 90s Megadeth was a very different Megadeth than Peace Cells and Rust in Peace. And I, you know, it's different than Dystopia, you know. So it was a kind of a pivotal moment in the middle, you know, that things could have gone either way, you know, like a Fulcrum could have gone slid back or slid forward. Unfortunately, we slid forward, and here we are having this conversation, you know, almost 20 years, well, exactly 20 years later. Yeah,
I mean, but like the fan you mentioned, that was my first exposure to Megadeth. I was 10 years old, and Crush 'Em was on a WCW wrestling compilation album. And I just thought that was also my first Metallica introduction as well. There was a live Seek and Destroy on there as well, but those two songs were the ones I kept coming back to. I bought it for the wrestling stuff, but and then from then on, I had to go out and get every Megadeth album and every Metallica album.
Well, and again, you know, you came into it maybe through wrestling. Some people get into music through games. All of a sudden, Guitar Hero shows up, and who knows how, you know, all this great music from the, you know, from the 80s that got a rebirth because of Guitar Hero, you know. And all of a sudden, young, you know, my kids, you know, were teenagers at that point, sitting around playing Guitar Hero to, you know, AC/DC songs and stuff I grew up on, and suddenly they're like, oh, this is actually pretty cool stuff, you know. Otherwise, it would have just been like, it's my parents' music, and they would have probably discarded it, but because it ended up on a game. So again, wrestling, video games, extreme sports, you know, these other outlets, you know, introduce people to music, and thank God we're one of those bands that's been included in a lot of that stuff.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting when you're on YouTube or something, you'll always see people saying, oh, like thumbs up if such a TV show or game brought you here. And then likewise, you got people going, oh, start the game, I just like the music. And ultimately, it doesn't matter where you hear it, as long as you actually be able to be exposed to it, be it Megadeth, be it Cheap Trick, be it any form of music that may not get as much airplay today or something.
You know, from the inside, as the creator of this stuff, we just make records and we move on. You know, and then we make the next record, we move on. You know what I mean? And we're aware. We listen to what our fans say. We're not blind to that. You know, but at the same time, you know, you are who you are at that time, and that's the record you make at that time. So.
Cool. That's I think a great statement to end this on.
Good. Awesome, man. Well, thanks for chatting today.
Thank you very much, David.
Yep. See you. Bye-bye.
All the best.